Imagine being the fan of a small market baseball team. Every single year, you go into the end of the season wondering why your team isn't making the biggest free agent pulls or why they're not even really being able to make the playoffs. And on the other end, you see teams that are winning the World Series every year, making deep runs to the playoffs, and turning around and signing the big market guys. And you ask yourself, well, how can a team in the same league have a budget difference by millions and millions of dollars? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about today. Right now, in the Major League Baseball world, there's a debate going on around what we know as the salary cap. And that debate could end up determining whether or not we get baseball next year. We're going to talk a little bit about today. This is important because baseball is America's pastime. It's a sport that's been around for a long time and it matters. The world cares about baseball, as we see with the World Baseball Classic going on right now. And anything that could potentially take away that from the world, it's worth taking a look into. My name is Logan Broadus, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this today because I am personally a massive fan of the Major League Baseball League. I've grown up a fan. I grew up right next to a minor league baseball stadium. I've always lived in a city with one. I care about it an awful amount. And I've also done all the research and looked into the different articles that kind of lay the outline for us and how we're able to determine what's going on. There's three main things that we're going to kind of get into today. First one being the current financial standing of the league. What does it look like, right? Why is there a debate going on something as simple as finances, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to get into the argument for the salary cap. What is one side saying why they should have that salary cap? And the second one we're going to look at is why they're against the salary cap. But we're going to look a little bit about why, those two sides of that argument create everything that we do. To begin with, the current standing of the Major League Baseball finance system is very, very unique. They're the only league that you will hear of that does not have what we know is as a salary cap. A salary cap limits owners paying their players to a certain ceiling and a floor. That ceiling and floor limits to say, I cannot pay a certain player more than this, and I can't pay him any certain lower than this. Major League Baseball doesn't have that. Major League Baseball is strictly built off of revenue and expenses. All money that's coming in is allowed to be spent in whichever way that the owner desires, whether that be on a massive player, right, to make a push in the playoffs, or save money yourself, right, because the owners also make money from this. And so those are the different kind of things that allow different teams and owners and players to kind of ebb and flow through that system without a floor and a ceiling. Let's start looking a little bit about some of the arguments that are being presented. So to begin with, getting rid of the salary cap or adding a salary cap gives competitive balance. Levi Bogner, in his article about this, talks about money and the way that it dictates success. And from that perspective, people are building onto the idea that if I have a floor and a ceiling of which every team was required to pay, no one could underpay, no one could overpay, that success would be a little bit more mediated across the board. Another big argument to that is the minor leagues and the structure of which that they have. There are 77 minor league teams. Most people don't talk about them because they're not on TV every single week. But they're a big deal to the program. That's how you get prospects up and through the rankings. Well, Mark Cryan in his article talks a little bit about the commissioner, Rob Manfred, and talks about how he specifically has come out and said that he believes they deserve to be paid more. Well, the reason why they're not getting paid more is because there's no ceiling floor. People can pay less than they think they need to. So those are a couple of the arguments that are really pushed towards that cap and what they think for it and what they want from it. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about arguments against. Tradition. Like I said, the finance system is very unique and it's very different than what we typically see. That's the way baseball has always been. Players and owners want to protect that tradition, right? And when it comes to those negotiations, that's part of the table that's brought. That's what's brought to the table and talked about. Another thing is it limits those top guys' earnings and owners' earnings, right? So if I'm the best, absolute best player in the league, why would I want the league to come to me and say I can't pay you more than that amount? Well, if I believe that I'm worth more than that, that's gone now. If this were to happen, so that is a reason that they are pushing against it. Is some of those higher level players. So that's where you're seeing that two sides of the argument isn't necessarily players and non-players. Well, part of the argument is top players and more minor league bottom guys, right? Because I want to be paid more, and I don't want to be paid less. And so that's kind of where that argument is also deriving out of. Today we talked a little bit about, and I informed you about the debate surrounding the MLB salary cap. To go a little bit step further than that, let's talk about why we may not have baseball next year. So the CBA, said by Cole Beasley, is said to come up in less than a year before there could be a new lockout. What is the CBA? Well, the CBA is the collective bargaining agreement. This is what facilitates these two sides of the argument to be allowed to argue, right? But here's the thing. If come December 1st, we don't have a new CBA agreement on the table, baseball, as we pretty much know and enjoy it, could be gone for a while. And that's because of this argument that's happening. And another big look into everything with the CBA is the comparison to other sports. As we already looked at it, Benjamin Garner talked about the NBA salary, talked a little bit about what that does in comparison with the MLB. And because of that, we believe that other sports are influencing decisions based on what we're looking at. But today we kind of talked about a lot about the salary cap, the CBA, and the financial standing. And then we kind of opened up into the two sides of the argument. Why should we have a salary cap? Why should we not have a salary cap? Well, my purpose is just to completely inform you guys. And it's so much more about just the money. It's about the league's future. Baseball has been around for way longer than me, way longer than you, right? It's controversial, and it's a conversation that's worth being listened to and cared about, because if baseball does leave, what are we going to watch? And it's one of those things where that conversation dictates everything that we do in it. Once again, my name is Logan Broadus. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope everybody has a great evening.
Good morning, everyone. Do you think people have wrong views? Now, I'm not talking about Hitler. I'm not talking about anyone of that level of severity, but just wrong views in terms of maybe a sports team, maybe political views, maybe just anything in that area of social division. And just with that information, do you think that wrong view makes someone deserve injustice or deserve a poor quality of life? Well, my name's Gavin Jones, and I'm here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the lack of compassion that we are seeing in America's culture today. And just in a way that I can see it, that I've seen it throughout the last few years, that social media, that social division culture wants us to be divided. They want to normalize that in a way that's not healthy. And I'm here to inform you guys about that. And I want to inform you guys in 3 ways about that. That we see it in the leadership of the president. We see it in our healthcare, our state healthcare, and we see it in our own personal lives once you get down to it. So with that, I want to start with the president. What we see is that, reported in an article in December 2025 by NPR, there was a couple murdered by their son, a husband and a wife. They were murdered by their son, and he was a drug addict and had all this messed up stuff. And they were big opposers of Trump. They didn't stand for Trump, and Trump knew that. And so when Trump heard about this, he went on Truth Social, social media, and he posted about them saying they died from, quote, Trump derangement syndrome. And so on that, that's a big reflection of his sympathy, of his compassion for others, for people on the other side. And also it shows how it impacts us, that we look to authority, and sometimes we follow that authority regardless of what they say. That on this post that he posted before it was archived on Truth Social, that it had 14,000 likes and 3,000 reposts, that there were people who were agreeing with him. There were people who were wanting to spread that message. And that just shows how much authority that a leader can give, that he can have, that can lead us to a normalized lack of compassion. And that's something I want to point out. But also to parallel with that, just looking at what happened with Charlie Kirk, that when he was shot and Trump mourned him, Times Magazine in September 2025, they talked about his speech. They had his speech spoken out, and he quoted in this saying, "This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop now." Now, the type of rhetoric he was talking about was demonizing people on opposite sides. And what we see is that, people called Charlie Kirk a Nazi. They said things like that. They said really hateful things. And then Trump called that out and saying it's dangerous to do things like that. But then 2 months later, when this comes out about the family being murdered, Trump does the exact same thing. I just want to point out to you guys the parallelism in that and just how normalized it seems. And I just want you guys to think about that. Just think about that. And in 2025, there was a column in the Daily Hampshire Gazette that talks about chauvinistic empathy, which that's to have empathy, to have compassion, except it's to a side that you lean towards. It's biased. And I believe when we do see compassion in the United States, we see chauvinistic empathy where it's based off of feelings and where it's towards the people I like and not towards the people I don't like. And so seeing these things in politics, that's normal. We know that's in politics and we think that's far away from our lives. But I want to tell you guys about what's happening in our own state, that there's lack of compassion in our own state, in our healthcare, that there's a private healthcare organization, as reported in the Equal Justice Initiative website on July 2025, that there's a company who takes over $100 million in tax money. The taxpayers pay them. We pay them $100 million over to take care of prisoners' health care, to make sure they're being sustained. And what we've come to learn recently, this was in 2025, and what we've come to learn is that they aren't being taken care of, that our money, not only is there lack of compassion on these prisoners, but there's lack of compassion on us, that our taxpayer money is not going towards where we thought it was going. And that healthcare, they're not doing what they're supposed to. They're not taking care of citizens. They're not taking care of prisoners who are citizens. We treat them like they're second class, but they're not. They are prisoners, but they are citizens. They deserve just as much quality of life as we do. And there's a lack of compassion there from the state. And what we see inside the prisons is that when they go to the nurse with a certain problem or anything like that, the nurse says, "Oh, they weren't compliant. That's why I sent them away. That's why I didn't take care of them." And we're bound to believe them because we have such a high view on a nurse compared to a prisoner that maybe sometimes we exert lack of compassion as well. And through that, we have the other side of chauvinistic empathy. That's the emphatic reasoning, that we don't have to feel things to understand that this is something that's unjust. That's something that's injustice, full of injustice. And so just to give you guys an example of how to, put that that emphatic reasoning on display, is to give you guys examples in that article of how prisoners are being treated. That in one of them, a man's leg is rotting. It is completely black. It's rotting away. And the nurse said, he's not eating his food. He's not eating his food correctly, and that's why his leg's rotting. And there's obviously injustice there. And just another one is that there's a 23-year-old woman in prison who has an unchecked lump on her breast. And we know that's breast cancer. But the nurses, no one cares in the prison to go help them. And so we see those things, and we know our tax money is going there, yet we're not doing anything about it. And there's a lack of compassion there in all sorts of ways from our state, but also from us, that we need to look at these injustices and make a choice. We need to do something. And so through that, that's when we go to the lack in our own lives. We've seen it in politics. We've seen it in the state of healthcare, but it's in our lives that, like I mentioned, we have to look at those unjust things and we have to decide if we're going to do something about them or not. And just to put it into perspective, that it seems we all need to experience a lack of compassion in order to help that lack of compassion, that we need to experience lack of compassion in order to love someone a little harder, in order to care about people a little more. And I feel like this is where we were able to see this when Charlie Kirk was murdered, that we had Democrats who were making fun of him. They were saying he got what he deserved, and there was no sympathy being shown, only that they were being proven right in a way. But then also, when Renee Good was murdered by an ICE agent, they said she got what she deserved as well. But these are loose observations, that they look past the fact that people lost their lives too soon, and they focus on right and wrong and opposing sides. And the whole point is that lives were lost, and we can use this as a bridge to love each other, to have empathy, to combine as a country, to come together as a country. And that's on us. We are allowed to do something about that. And so knowing those things, just knowing all those examples that I've given, this information I've given to you guys, I just want you to think that also, do I give myself compassion a lot of times? Just to give you one small example, it's just how many times have you had to be somewhere early in the morning, yet you still choose to stay up late? It's a small little silly thing, but the small things matter. The small things add up to the big things, and that can help us understand that compassion is needed in all sorts of areas of our lives. And so, with that, I just want to leave you guys with the question of what do we do? Well, I'm not here to give you an answer on what to do. I'm here to give you the information, but I want you to know you can do something about it. You can use that emphatic reasoning and you can decide, what are we going to do? And that is in your hands. So with saying that, this has been my speech. I'm Gavin Jones. Thank you guys for listening.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is your house to you? I'm assuming a 10. If somebody were to just break into your house and start eating all your food, destroying your bed, and just leaving diseases everywhere in your house, I'm assuming that you'd be pretty upset. This is what is happening with the invasive animals that is across the world. My name is Gavin Tournay, and I come from Alabama, where is a state that it has an invasive boar problem, and I hunt there in Alabama, and I've seen firsthand the destruction that happens when invasive boars go through hunting grounds or even recreational areas that frankly do not look the best when you're trying to go out and just enjoy being around nature, as well as when they go through lands, they displace other animals and they end up killing plants and animals that need to live off the land. Speaking of destroying land, a study that was made by Stokely, and Beasley and Traichler and Ricard shows that over 70 kilometers of land was torn up and eaten and rooted by boars of just controlled land in the area that they had eyes on and that they were monitoring and making tests on. That can be projected across the entirety of the United States where the pigs are at, and it shows that it is much, much, much more than just 70 kilometers of land that is destroyed. As well as destroying the land, it displaces animals, which gets into my next point of another study that was done by Stokely, was that the turkey population has declined by 3 times in areas that boars are in that are inserted in, and while the boar population has increased by 3 times as well. So it is showing that they are not only just moving out the animals that are already there, they're actually making them less procreative and there's less breeding happening because of the pigs, while they're just bolstering the numbers up and making more pigs in those areas, destroying more land in those areas, and while killing all the plant life and other animals, such as small animals such as birds, lizards, amphibians, ants, anything like that. Which gets into my next point. On an island named Ascension, it is a very small island that doesn't have a lot of native predators that are mammals or large amphibians or birds. It only has around a few predators that are completely non-native. They're also invasive. They kill native animals such as hair-lipped crabs, the ascension, the the ascension crake, and the night heron, which they are killing very many of them, which is putting them endangered, while they are also killing the any other ant species that is on that island. So it shows you that it's not only a American thing, it's not only a big country thing, it is every little small island as well that has an invasive problem. It can show that those invasive animals can spread to many different places and crevices across the world, and that they also will damage small islands. Overall, it's something that's completely worldwide that humans everywhere have to deal with, whether you are in North America or whether you are in South America or Europe or sorry about that, whether you are even in small islands. It is it's something that is dealing everywhere. My name is Gavin Tornate. Thank you again for listening to my speech, and I hope that this information did you well.